There is a silence that falls when the world's applause fades, when the last echo of accomplishment dies in the hollow of the soul. You stand there, bathed in the glow of success, and yet, beneath the surface quietly, insistently, a dull ache pulses. Not the pain of loss, but the stranger's ache of emptiness, arriving even as the world crowns you victorious. It is here, in the hush between triumph and truth, that the reality of existence first unfurls its shadow. The first and greatest truth is this: suffering is not the exception, but the very foundation of all sentient life. Existence itself is thirst unceasing, unrelieved, insatiable. Every desire is a cry from the abyss, each fulfilled wish birthing only new longings, more desperate and more subtle than the last. To live is to strain against a chain, to feel the slow grinding of the will upon the gears of circumstance, with neither rest nor resolution. All our striving, all our victories, all the tokens of achievement, serve merely to distract us from the gnawing sense of lack that accompanies us like a shadow through every season. In the long corridors of civilization, we have constructed myriad distractions, glittering amusements, high ideals, rituals of progress and productivity. We are trained to believe in the myth of arrival, that somewhere just beyond the next summit, the next acquisition, lies the peace for which we hunger. But every arrival dissolves into mist. Every victory is only a temporary reprieve from the deeper, unsatisfied longing that defines the human soul. It is not failure that makes you empty. It is the very structure of desire itself, a wound that can never be closed, because it is the condition of being conscious. Even as you achieve, the ache persists, for the will is an appetite that feeds upon itself, producing more craving than satisfaction. This is the quiet cruelty of existence, that every fulfilled longing births only the seed of a new want, and so the cycle of unrest continues, as relentless and indifferent as the turning of the stars. If you listen, you can hear the ancient lament hidden beneath the surface of every culture, the poetry of loss, the music of longing, the stories of gods who can never rest. We surround ourselves with symbols of meaning, but the symbols crumble in our hands. Each civilization promises happiness through conquest, through virtue, through mastery of nature or self, but each, in its own time, reveals the truth that even the gods are weary of their own immortality. Modernity, with all its shimmering surfaces, offers nothing new under the sun. We are told to maximize, optimize, manifest, to seek wellness, to consume novelty, to build our brands. But beneath the veneer of progress, the same hunger thrums the same fear of being left behind, the same need to be seen, to be chosen, to matter. The digital world accelerates the illusion of satisfaction, offering endless distraction, yet never the rest that the soul craves. One scroll leads to another. One message brings only the desire for more. At the summit of success, the same loneliness waits. You have what you wanted, but the wanting has not ended. The recognition, the wealth, the love, they land for a moment, like birds on a wire, and then they are gone, leaving you with the strange knowledge that fulfillment was always a phantom, a mirage receding with every step. This is why you feel empty, even when you are winning. Because winning is only a brief interval in the long, unresolved music of longing. Look quietly within and see how suffering grows not from lack, but from the very abundance of your desires. Each wish, each ambition, is the will's effort to break out of itself, to become other than it is. But the self is a closed circle, a labyrinth with no exit. Every path leads back to the center, where the same ache resides, the ache of being, the pain of awareness. We are haunted not by what we lack, but by the endless horizon of what we could be, could have, could feel. The will torments us with visions of possibility, of alternative lives, of what might have been. The more we possess, the more we are pursued by the ghost of what remains out of reach. In this way, existence itself is deprivation, the inescapable gap between the self and the world, between what is and what could be. The promise of modernity is the promise of endless progress, of ever-ascending satisfaction. Yet, the further we climb, the further happiness recedes, like a distant shore glimpsed but never touched. The cult of positivity demands that we suppress our sorrow, that we conceal our emptiness with the mask of achievement. But sorrow returns, persistent as the tide, eroding even the most dazzling successes, revealing their hollowness. The emptiness is not a flaw in your character. It is the shadow cast by consciousness itself. To awaken is to feel the cold breath of this emptiness, to see through the mirage of fulfillment, and to recognize the tragic beauty of desire that never rests. Each victory carries within it the seed of its own disappointment. Every achievement reveals the underlying void, not as a punishment, but as the silent truth at the heart of being. In the stillness that follows every conquest, you meet yourself, not the triumphant self that the world applauds, but the silent witness who has seen through the game. The I that remains, stripped of ornament and pretense, is the same self that has always wondered, always hungered, always sought something more. All the riches of the world, all the crowns and banners fall away. The emptiness remains, unchanged. It is in this emptiness that the world's illusion is most clear. We live not in a paradise of fulfillment, but in a labyrinth of endless craving. The myth of the happy ending is the last, cruelest illusion, one that keeps us running, striving, exhausting ourselves in pursuit of a peace that is always elsewhere. Even as you win, you lose the very thing you sought, the cessation of wanting. There is a strange relief in facing this truth, a quiet dignity in the surrender of illusions. To see that suffering is the fabric of existence is not to despair, but to stand outside the game for a moment, watching as the world scurries on in its frantic pursuit of nothingness. The will is a wheel that spins for no one. The ego is a mask worn by the suffering self, a futile gesture against the void. Listen to the stories that humanity tells itself, the hero's journey, the narrative of progress, the myth of redemptive love. Each is a circle drawn around the emptiness, an attempt to give form to the formless ache at the heart of being. But even the greatest stories end, and the silence returns. The hero becomes the ordinary man again. The beloved becomes the stranger. The victory fades into memory, and the ache resumes. Even love, that highest of human ideals, reveals itself as longing in disguise, a hunger to escape the solitude of the self, to merge with something other, to be completed. But love, too, is subject to the law of becoming. It waxes and wanes, flares and fades. Every union is temporary, every connection, a brief reprieve from the underlying solitude of existence. The deepest truth of love is not its fulfillment, but its impossibility, its inability to finally resolve the ache for unity. The child dreams of growing up, believing that adulthood will bring answers. The adult, disillusioned, seeks solace in distraction, achievement, or nostalgia for a lost innocence. Old age brings neither wisdom nor rest, but the gradual stripping away of illusions, until only the bare bones of being remain. The cycle repeats, longing, striving, disappointment, resignation. The pursuit of meaning itself is born of this same suffering. We invent purposes, grand or petty, to justify our unrest, to lend shape to the formlessness of desire. Religion, philosophy, art, all arise from the same wellspring of dissatisfaction, the need to explain or transcend the pain of being. Yet each meaning is provisional. Each system ultimately collapses, leaving only the silence in which all things dissolve. Look at the world as it is. Nations rise and fall, lovers meet and part, empires crumble into dust. All things pass, and yet the will persists, undiminished, unfulfilled. Even as civilizations flourish, they carry within themselves the seeds of their own decay. The pageantry of history is nothing but the theater of suffering, the endless repetition of the same drama, played out in different costumes, under different names. To see this is to be freed not from suffering, but from the illusion that suffering can ever be wholly escaped. The wise do not seek to abolish pain, but to see it clearly, to sit with it in the quiet of honest awareness. In this lucidity, there is a strange solace, a gentle resignation that does not rage against the world, but accepts its emptiness as the only true foundation of peace. Modern culture, in its terror of stillness, urges us to keep moving, to accumulate, to perform, to be seen. The cult of productivity consumes the soul, turning life itself into a ledger of transactions, a race with no finish line. But in the quiet spaces between achievements, when the screens are dark and the applause has faded, the old emptiness returns. It is the pulse of the world itself, the beating of a heart that can never be still. We turn to consumption, hoping that new pleasures will drown the ache. We pursue novelty, seeking to escape the monotony of our own consciousness. But every pleasure, once tasted, becomes bland. Every novelty, once known, turns to dust. The soul grows weary, not from too little, but from too much distraction, too much stimulation, too many promises that cannot be kept. This is the poverty of abundance. The more we possess, the less we feel. The more we are surrounded by noise, the less we hear the silent truth that underlies all things. Modernity promises everything, but delivers only emptiness. An emptiness that deepens with every new acquisition, every fleeting victory. If you feel empty when you are winning, it is not because you are broken, but because you have glimpsed the hidden architecture of existence. The self that seeks to be filled is itself a fiction, a mirage sustained by the endless turning of the will. To win is only to postpone the reckoning, to delay the moment when the emptiness must be faced. The poets have always known this. Listen to their voices, soft as twilight, whispering of loss, of longing, of the quiet futility at the heart of love. The artist, the mystic, the philosopher, all are exiles from the land of easy answers, wanderers in the desert of the real. Their consolation is not in what can be gained, but in the clarity that comes with surrendering the pursuit itself. The mask slips. The performance ends, and what remains is only the raw, unadorned fact of being fragile, fleeting, unresolved. The ego, stripped of its triumphs, is revealed as nothing more than a trembling witness, a consciousness adrift in a world without certainty or lasting joy. There is, beneath all suffering, a quiet ground of stillness, a place untouched by victory or defeat, a silence that endures when all stories have ended. It is not peace in the usual sense, but the cessation of striving, the acceptance of emptiness as the final, irreducible truth. In this acceptance, there is no triumph, no lesson, no reward, only the clarity of awareness, the lucidity of seeing things as they are. Do not mistake this clarity for despair. It is not the darkness of nihilism, but the cold, clean air of truth. To see that life is suffering is not to wish for its end, but to understand its nature, to stop grasping at what cannot satisfy, to let the restless will fall silent, if only for a moment. The world continues. The sun rises and sets. The seasons turn. The pageantry of existence unfolds. In the midst of this endless motion, the wise do not seek fulfillment, but the quiet dignity of acceptance. The emptiness is not a problem to be solved, but the essence of what it means to be alive. In the end, there is only this, the slow burning candle of consciousness, flickering in the darkness, illuminating nothing but itself. The soul, having seen through every illusion, rests at last in the stillness that precedes all becoming. The world remains as it is, unchanged, indifferent, implacable. The self, dissolved into the silence, is no longer troubled by victory or defeat. Here, in the hush beyond all striving, the soul finds its strange, melancholy peace, not in fulfillment, but in the lucid awareness that suffering is not the enemy, but the only companion we have ever truly known. There is nothing left to win, nothing left to lose. Only the quiet persistence of being, empty and complete. The hunger for meaning gnaws beneath every word, every gesture, every night spent staring into the hollow sky. The flesh aches not just with wounds or with pleasure's fleeting rush, but with the silent dread that all is vanishing, all is slipping between trembling fingers. The mind turns endlessly, looking for a reason, seeking a story that might soothe the rawness of existence. Yet every story once lived, once believed fractures against the stone wall of impermanence, dissolving like a child's dream at dawn. There is no balm in the world for the suffering that arises from within, for it is not an enemy to be defeated, nor a lesson to be learned. It is the original condition of the self, the shadow that lengthens as the light of each new hope fades. To suffer is not to be cursed, it is simply to be awake. The pain that seethes at the root of being is not a sign of failure, but the evidence that we have come to know the true weight of things. It is here, in this inescapable pressure, that we glimpse the cold clarity beneath all illusions. See how the world labors to conceal this, draping its emptiness with color and noise. The market overflows with offerings, new idols, new cures, new technologies, promising relief, promising escape, promising a permanent distraction. The soul is shuffled from one craving to the next, intoxicated for a moment by novelty, then cast again into the gray water of longing. We are made to believe that detachment is surrender, that to cease striving is to collapse. But striving is only the wind that fans the fire of restlessness. What is it that we are running from? It is not the world, nor the burdens of circumstance, but the insistent knowledge that nothing is ever enough. Each pleasure dulls into monotony. Each triumph withers into memory. To chase satisfaction is to run in a circle, drawing ever tighter until the heart can scarcely breathe. The illusion is not that happiness exists, but that it can be held fixed, secured, made permanent. Every attempt to possess it is the tightening of a noose woven from hope. There is a silence that falls after desire has exhausted itself, a quiet that feels both empty and whole. Here, in the absence of striving, the world reveals its true face, mute, indifferent, stripped of enchantment. The self stands alone, unclothed by its stories, no longer insulated by the busy noise of ambition. It is not peace, not even resignation, but a kind of lucid stillness, the eye that remains open when all dreams have passed. Illusion, like a veil, is woven not from falsehoods but from wishes, the gentle lies we tell ourselves. Because the world, in its rawness, is unbearable, we cling to memory, to fantasy, to the conviction that somewhere else, some other life, might redeem the present moment. But every fantasy fades. Every memory becomes unreachable. The illusion collapses, and we are left with what has always been, a breath, a heartbeat, the ache of existence. Detachment does not mean withdrawal from the world, nor does it require a stoic mask. It is simply the recognition that all things joy, suffering, love, loss arise and pass, leaving neither debt nor dividend. The self, no longer chained to the wheel of craving, learns to watch the dance of appearances without reaching, without grasping, without fear. The taste of this detachment is bitter at first, for the will resists its own surrender. But in time, a strange sweetness emerges, a quiet relief, a subtle gratitude for the respite from becoming. All around, the world clamors for your attention, urging you to invest your hope in futures that cannot arrive, in pleasures that cannot stay. To resist is not to conquer, but to witness the futility of resistance itself. The detachment that follows is not victory, but a letting go, a gentle unraveling of the threads that bind suffering to desire. There is no transcendence, only the stillness that remains when striving ceases. The ache of existence does not vanish, it becomes transparent, a window through which you see the world's fragile beauty. The sorrow remains, but it is not heavy. It is the quiet shadow that gives depth to the fading light, the silent witness to all that is passing. Nothing is possessed, nothing is lost. The self, emptied of the need to become, rests in the motionless heart of things, and the world, indifferent and impermanent, continues on silent, relentless, beautiful in its futility. ChatGPT đã nói, there is no crescendo, no heroic ascent, to meaning only the slow unveiling of the background silence against which all human noise is set. Suffering, like a tide, withdraws but never disappears. Its salt lingers in the mouth after every fleeting sweetness, every temporary truce. The world stage is crowded with the pageantry of purpose, but beneath each mask, the same longing stirs, the desire for relief from the weariness of wishing. Each new day arrives wrapped in the promise of change. The sunlight, pouring through the window, offers the illusion of beginning again, of a fresh chance to outrun the shadows that press against the soul's periphery. Yet the self awakens always, as it was haunted by memories that do not heal, by dreams that persist even as they wither, by a faint tremor of unease that no victory can dispel. The hours parade past, gaudy and empty, dressed in the costumes of accomplishment or defeat, but the substance remains unchanged, the unyielding presence of the will, turning upon itself. The will, that blind striving which lies at the heart of consciousness, is both tormentor and companion. It propels all life forward, but its every movement is an evasion of stillness, a refusal to abide in what is. Even the happiest moments are shadowed by the knowledge that they must end, that the ache will return, unappeased. The more we clutch at joy, the more swiftly it dissolves. Like a dream remembered at the edge of waking, happiness is both real and unreal, tangible for an instant, then gone, leaving behind only the hunger that summoned it. To look unflinchingly at this structure is to see through the world's enchantments. All that is built must crumble. Every bond will loosen. Every promise will be broken by time, by entropy, by the slow corrosion of hope. The monuments of civilization, the towers, the books, the names etched in stone, are so much dust, waiting to be scattered by a wind indifferent to human wishes. Yet we persist, compelled by the will's inertia, fashioning meanings out of emptiness, clinging to symbols that cannot save us. How strange that the mind, capable of such vast imaginings, cannot will itself into peace. The intellect circles endlessly, constructing systems, refuting old errors, assembling new philosophies. Yet each insight, once gained, is already slipping away, losing its power to soothe the wound it sought to explain. There is no end to the questions, only a deepening silence where the answers ought to be. The mind, hungry for certainty, finds only the shifting sands of possibility. Observe the world as it turns, how suffering multiplies beneath the surface of apparent prosperity. Behind the laughter at gatherings, the celebration of success, the mask of contentment, lies an unspoken recognition that all is provisional. Even those who seem to possess the world are not spared. Their victories breed anxiety. Their pleasures are tainted by the fear of loss, their sense of self fragile as glass. The will, unsatisfied, invents new hungers, new ambitions, new ways to disguise the original emptiness. There are moments rare and unsought when the tumult subsides, and the mind glimpses its true condition. Alone, in the depth of night, or in the emptiness that follows achievement, there is no audience, no goal, only the silent fact of being. These moments are neither joyous nor tragic. They are intervals in which the self perceives the futility of striving, the illusion of progress, the unbroken continuity of suffering. In this clarity, there is no comfort, but there is truth. and truth, though bitter, is at least clean. The self, stripped of its illusions, is lighter and more transparent than the world teaches us to believe. Identity, the tapestry woven from memory and hope, from desire and fear, is revealed as little more than a shifting pattern on the surface of something deeper and more impersonal. Beneath the drama of becoming lies the silent persistence of being a flame burning without purpose, without direction, simply because it cannot do otherwise. This is not a revelation that brings release. The will persists and suffering endures, but in the space between desire and fulfillment, something shifts. The need to become relaxes its grip. The endless calculation how to win, how to matter, how to escape grows still. What remains is a gaze turned inward, a quiet witness to the spectacle of the self, the play of shadows and light upon the wall of time. And so the days pass, unremarkable yet irrevocable. The years accumulate, each one bearing away a little more hope, a little more fear, until even longing itself begins to fade. There is no final redemption, no moment in which the circle is broken, but there is a gentler way of seeing, not as a victor, not as a victim, but as an observer who knows the price of consciousness and accepts it without protest. In this acceptance, the world grows quieter. The beauty of things fragile, impermanent, indifferent shines more clearly through the veil of expectation. A falling leaf, a silent room, the lines of a tired face, all speak of the same truth, that nothing is secure, nothing is possessed, and yet, for a time, everything is given. The sorrow is not less, but it is cleaner, less tangled in the lies we spin to avoid it. Detachment, misunderstood as coldness or retreat, is simply the result of having seen too deeply into the machinery of desire. The detachment of the wise is not indifference, but a form of mourning, a gentle sorrow for all that must pass, and for the suffering that cannot be undone. It is the knowledge that joy is always tinged with loss, that every union contains the seed of parting, that every hope is the shadow of its own disappointment. The world does not relent. The tide of suffering rises and falls, indifferent to our efforts, untouched by our pleading. Yet in the midst of this, there is a strange mercy, the mercy of limitation, of boundaries, of endings. What the will cannot change, it must at last accept. In this acceptance, the self is neither destroyed nor consoled, but simply quieted aflame sheltered from the storm, flickering in the darkness, at peace with its own impermanence. Thus, the soul, having traversed the labyrinth of illusion, arrives not at victory, but at a place beyond ambition and regret. Here, in the hush that follows surrender, there is no need to be anything other than what one is, a witness to the passing of time, a breath in the vast silence, a single note in the music of endless longing. The world remains, and suffering endures, but the will has grown weary, and in its weariness, the first true stillness is born. All things fade into the gentle twilight of what cannot be held. In the hush that arrives when desire has exhausted its own voice, there is no pronouncement, no grand summation, only the slow recession of will, as a tide leaving behind wet sand that glimmers in the last indifferent light. One stands not above, nor beyond, but within the quiet persistence of suffering, seeing at last that its origin is inseparable from the very pulse of being. Longing dissolves into a thin autumnal air, each breath tinged with the knowledge that nothing sought can be kept, and nothing kept can be truly known. The past is a series of broken reflections, each one shimmering for a moment before shattering into silence. The future, once radiant with possibility, has dimmed to a muted horizon. The self stands exposed, shorn of narrative, emptied of striving, neither victor nor vanquished, but a quiet witness to its own undoing. There is no flame to carry forward, no secret wisdom to impart. There is only the recognition that all efforts to escape suffering are themselves the engines of its return. The restless will, once believed to be the voice of life, now reveals itself as the slow tightening of a snare. The more one resists, the more one is entangled. In surrender, there is not triumph, but a subtle loosening, a falling away of everything the mind once clung to for safety. What remains is a lucidity as pale and unyielding as winter light. The world is not healed, nor the soul mended. The ache persists, yet it is no longer a wound to be dressed, but a companion whose silence teaches more than comfort ever could. The days pass without promise, the nights arrive without menace. Each hour is its own ending, unadorned, unredeemed, and strangely complete. The self, once frantic with the search for meaning, sits quietly in its own shadow. The heart grows accustomed to the rhythm of loss, to the patient unraveling of every illusion. This is not serenity, but a sober acceptance that suffering is the most faithful of companions, remaining long after joy and hope have faded. It is the signature of consciousness, the echo that endures when all other voices fall silent. To live is to watch all things depart: youth, ambition, love, even the memory of what once gave comfort. Yet there is a dignity in this vanishing, a gentle clarity that arrives only when striving is relinquished. Nothing is left to win, nothing left to fear, for the world has shown itself in full, empty, luminous, indifferent, and passing. There are no final words, no gates to be crossed. Only a gradual dissolving, as water slips back into the ocean, as the candle dwindles to a pin of light, and then is gone. The soul does not ascend nor descend, but drifts quietly into the silent space where will is stilled, and suffering no longer asks to be named. In this ending that is not an ending, the emptiness remains not as a flaw to be repaired, but as the final, silent truth. The world continues, untouched by triumph or lament. In the heart's last stillness, there is only the bare fact of being a breath, a shadow, a flicker of consciousness fading gently into night.